Good looking little nuke there, nice and calm, well populated. They're acting queen right so far. Starting to draw out some foundation. They do more of that if I fed them some more. I need to make sure they're queen right before I move them out of this yard and set them up to feed. And I've got a hitchhiker. That's not something I want to see. There she is, good looking queen. It's almost too hot today to be drinking coffee. Almost. It's about 74. Hey, Bee. Hey, Bee. Hey guys, Nathan at Duck River Honey. This is number 10 in my vlog on building a bee business. For anybody new to what I'm doing here, I've been scaling beekeeping for several years, and then early this year got laid off from my day job, and I'm trying to make a jump this season to get to the point where I can be a sustainable full-time beekeeper. So I'm doing a weekly update on that, what I'm doing and what I'm thinking about and how I'm trying to do this. You know, I'm big on promoting beekeeping, and gosh, this is so off topic, but I'm gonna go into this. I think there's a college debt crisis in the U.S., and there's a crisis of advice that is given and not given to especially high schoolers, where people say you got to go to college to get a good job. You got to go to college to get a good job. Well, if you major in history and you don't want to be a history teacher, you're going to end up working at Starbucks as a barista. And I think you would have been better off going to a 6-week lineman's course and becoming a lineman, or doing work with your hands. And I think beekeeping fits into that. Nobody promotes beekeeping as a career for young people. And I think it's a shame. You're outside all the time, you're messing with nature, you're doing something productive, you're creating something good for the world, for people, for the ecosystem. It's just, I wish that more people knew about it, and more kids were wanting to get into it. So learn from what I'm doing, mistakes and successes and everything, and maybe somebody else can have a side hustle or a full-time job someday based off of what I'm doing. So this week I got another round of splits, excess brood harvested to make splits with. I've already done one round of splits. I made about 25 nukes, and I've started going through some of those to see how many of them took and how many didn't. So I sort of messed up when I set up my first round of splits. I harvested excess brood, put it above a queen excluder, shook all the bees down, and that gives me assurance that there is no queen in these brood frames. I set it above an excluder for 5 or 6 days, and that allows any eggs or very young larvae to age out so that they're too old to make an emergency queen out of. Well, I harvested those splits off and I let them sit over, queenless overnight, and went through not real carefully, and then introduced and looked for emergency cells, and then introduced my queen cells, and I introduced some virgin queens. So I did have some emergency cells in those brood frames. I guess that they were so far removed from the queen pheromone that they started some cells that I missed, and I didn't go through them carefully enough. So that is on me. That's something it's like I tell my kids all the time, you know better than that. Why did you do it? Well, I have to say the same thing to myself on that. I know better than that. I was in a hurry, I was rushing, and thought, well, we'll just let this go and see. So I've got most of my queens are returned. I'm going to get a high return rate regardless. Most of them are going to be the queens I grafted, but I am going to have some emergency queens, and I'm going to try to keep them separated because I really like the queen line that I grafted from. In fact, I may graft from her again. I'm a little worried about concentrating genetics too much. I don't want too much concentration, but that queen, man alive, she had a very heavy hive all through winter with a very small cluster, and then yesterday or 2 or 3 days ago, whenever I pulled splits out, her hive looked like it exploded, and we're a week to 10 days away from the main flow right now, and I had to pull four solid capped brood frames away from her because they looked like they were starting to get the swarm impulse. So that is a sort of queen I really would like to move to, where I could push her forward by feeding syrup earlier in the season and get her to brood up faster, but I don't have to. And I don't have to do a lot to keep her from swarming. So that's a queen I really like. She's gentle, does well with mites, and just has this brood up phase in the spring that I really do like. Also got another bee yard set up this week. I've been meaning to do that. I had to do some fence work out there, so I knocked that out yesterday. Ticks and snakes are out in force. I saw a North American racer yesterday. I saw a king snake in my yard last night, and I've had a bunch of ticks on me so far. So welcome to Tennessee in the spring and summer and fall. In a lot of ways, winter is my favorite season of the year here because there's no snakes and no ticks, and the weather is bearable. It gets so humid and hot here in the summer. Summer's probably my least favorite season. Spring is bee season, so that covers a lot of evils. Bee season covers a lot of evils. Also gotten some practice marking queens, handling queens barehanded. That's good. I've got to get good at that. That's one of those core competencies that I've just got to have. And, I'm moving forward with it. I haven't hurt a queen yet. That's my big fear, is hurting a queen. I'm more worried about hurting a queen than I am getting stung, obviously. I get stung a bunch. So haven't hurt one yet. That's going pretty good. Getting more confident there. Tomorrow morning, I'm leaving probably 3 or 4 in the morning for Corey Stevens up in Missouri. and I'm going to spend the day with him. I'm going to document his Harbo assay. I may ask him some more stuff as well. We'll see what we get into. I don't have an agenda for this trip, so it's not going to be a list of questions, which is what my typical interviews look like. So we'll see how that goes. I'm also going to bring back 25 virgin queens from Missouri, and that's why I've got the nukes set up, or the splits, and I should be able to pull them Sunday or Monday. I'm going to carefully go through them and knock down any emergency cells that I find and get those queens introduced, probably just do a candy release, because they will have been on hives, I think, 6 days at that point, 7 on Monday. And they shouldn't be able to make an emergency queen after I knock down any cells they've already got in there. And that should give me a really good acceptance rate on those virgin queens. So coming up, main flow. Our honey flow is coming. We are in dogwood bloom right now. Apple trees have bloomed. I've seen some Osage orange in bloom. And I am seeing the buds on tulip poplars. Tulip poplar is probably at 75 or 80% leaf right now, and once they get to 100% leaf, they'll typically start to bloom. So I will be surprised if we make it to April 25th without seeing black locust and tulip poplar in bloom. It may be the first week of May before that really gets going good, but we're right there. Next 5 to 10 days, I expect to see some major flows coming. And if you guys don't know the difference in major and minor flows and want to learn more, I did an in-depth, it took me a year to make. I did a video on nectar flows. I started in the spring and went all the way through fall with the video, with resources that you can use to learn about your nectar flows. Honeybee net forage maps are something that everybody should look at. Honey Plants in North America is a book that everybody should have. I'll link to that video up here because it's just a really good resource. It really is. I've also got to get a lot of woodenware knocked together. I got to get some boxes put together, get another round of wax dipping done. I've got some wax dipping I'm going to do for some people and charge. So hopefully that'll cover my propane cost, which would be nice. And I'm hoping to get all of my double mating nukes wax dipped, and then get about 100 supers dipped. And if I can do that, I feel like that will put me into the flow, and I'll be pretty solid on woodenware. At some point, I'm gonna have to get more frames put together, get another 1,000 frames put together, but I've got enough assembled right now that I'm not sweating that too bad. Still got to get into the honey house. I've been kind of putting that off because I've got to get the wall and ceiling paneling put up, and I've got these plastic panels, fiber reinforced plastic. I've got to cut 5-inch holes in them to go over the light fixtures, and I've got a bunch of wall outlets in there, and I've got to cut rectangles for all the wall outlets, and I know it's going to be tedious and aggravating, and I've just been putting it off. I've had a lot of bee work to get done, a lot of woodenware work to get done, and I've just been focusing on that. So in the next week or two, I'm gonna get in the honey house and try to get that knocked out. I'd like to say thanks to Thomas Kingsley, Charles Carroll, and David Ball. They all made donations to the channel through my website. I've got a PayPal donation link there. You can actually donate to the channel through Super Thanks on YouTube, but YouTube keeps like 30% of whatever's donated, and PayPal keeps, their 2.7 or 3% or whatever. So appreciate you guys doing that. It really does help. I don't talk a lot about this, but there are people that make a lot of money on YouTube, but they make viral videos that go out to millions of people and have a very long watch time. Like, I love watching Blacktail Studio videos. He makes these really neat epoxy and very fancy walnut tables, and I can watch that all night. Woodworking and stuff like that, projects, and that is what makes money on YouTube, because you've got a bunch of people seeing it for a long amount of watch hours, and that allows YouTube to show more ads during videos. I've got a very narrow niche here. I've got a niche within a niche. It's like a beekeeping education business sort of channel, and beekeeping is not that big of a market, so I don't get the views, I don't get the watch hours, and that's just the way it is. You know, it's fine. I'm doing what I do, and but the income potential's not that great. So I really do appreciate the donations. It does help out, guys. I appreciate it. Question and answer this week. The video I did last week on breaking Beehive boxes raised a fuss over on Beesource. I'll link to the thread probably in the first comment. I'll pin that. You can go read that. And the comments were good and critical. And I understand why. You know, people were fussing that I didn't do the test in exactly the right way, and my results were skewed and not that significant and this and that. And I think they're sort of missing the point of what I was trying to do. This was not a scientific experiment. This is a practical, real-world knowledge gaining exercise. I wanted to see if using a lap joint, which is technically what a rabbit is, a rabbit joint, it makes a lap joint, or a miter would be acceptable compared to a box joint in beehive boxes over time. And I found the way that I was stressing them, yes, a miter is actually the strongest, and a lap joint was the second strongest, and box joint was the weakest. And I think that's because of imperfect glue coverage. It's hard to get perfect glue coverage on those box joints. I think if I did get perfect glue coverage, it would perform better. So what that test boiled down to for me was, I think rot is the death of most boxes. I don't think it's breakage. I don't think the joints coming apart or breaking is the death of most boxes. I think it's rot. And the lap joint or rabbit joint and the miter joint have far less end grain exposed, and end grain is what absorbs water faster than face grain or long grain. So I really think that if that miter would work and you could find a way to assemble them square and true and fast, and you could get shear strength and you could prevent warping and cupping over time, that would be a far superior joint because you have no exposed end grain. And I'm going to put some work into that. If I make my own boxes, I'm going to put some work into that and try to perfect that. Probably do some more testing and figure out what I think would do well. I'm also going to revisit a question that I answered in the second or third video in this series by Hope Sadler. She said, "Well done as always, Nathan. I want to expand, sell nukes, and make honey. With your expansion plan and honey needs, how are you going to balance the two?" How are you going to balance the two, honey and expansion? That's a good question. And I'm going to give an update on that. So far, I came into spring with about 40 colonies. I made about 25 splits. I'm expecting to get 20 or 22 nucleus colonies out of that. And I'm going to make 25 more splits within the next week. So depending on how many I get there, that's going to put me at somewhere around 80, 85 colonies probably. And of those, I'll have 40-ish production colonies. And I would say that I've played that pretty tight. And if I've made a mistake so far, it's that I haven't pushed the bees far enough, hard enough, fast enough. I think I could have started grafting maybe a week earlier than I did. And I think if I had kept all of my hives a little bit smaller and fed them, I think I could have had an extra round of splits in between my March 27th split and my April 15th split. I think I could have gotten another round of splits in, but it would have been touch and go to do that. So I think I've played it pretty tight, but I just don't know that I've been aggressive enough. Another thing that I've done wrong is I didn't sacrifice honeycomb soon enough. I came into spring with maybe 40 or 50 boxes of pure honeycomb. No brood has ever been in them. It's pure, clean honeycomb. And I wanted to keep it that way. I set them up in 9-frame supers, and I was not going to use that comb until the main nectar flow hit. So when I did my first round of splits, I put foundations back in to replace the frames that I pulled out of these hives. And they didn't draw any of it out because I didn't feed them any sugar syrup and we didn't have a nectar flow. And again, I think if I had given them drawn comb and I'd fed them, I could have got another round of splits in, or I would have had a lot more brood to harvest right now, and actually could have done, you know, these 25 queens from Corey plus maybe another 15 or 20 that I would have grafted for myself. So I think I would have been further ahead if I'd been more aggressive early in the season. So coming up this weekend, I've got a video on the second round of splits that I did. There's some stuff in there that's pretty interesting. And that's going to be it for this weekend. Of course, I mentioned I'm going to Corey Stevens tomorrow, so I'll do some stuff there with him. And hopefully we'll have time to get that edited for next week. If not, it'll be in a couple of weeks, depending on how much content I get and all that. Editing takes time, guys. It really does. Like, it takes hours a week to edit. I usually go in my office after the kids are in bed and edit for 2 or 3 hours to be able to put out 2 videos a week. So it takes some time. Guys, if you've got questions or comments, leave them below. You can also email info@duckriverhoney.com. I try to pick a couple questions every week and get those answered. So leave me some interesting stuff. I like interesting questions. Guys, I appreciate you watching. I'll see you on the next one. What do you think about that?
So Fishy's butt are red.
Well, she's getting ready to spawn right now. She's got eggs in there.
Well, let's put her in the water.
Yeah, let's put her back in the water. Go on, dog.
No, let's send them back in the water.
Okay.
Let's read.
All right, well, you're probably not big enough for this one. She's big fish. Here, help. Push her. Push her back in. There you go.
There she goes.
How big was that fish, Maddie Kay?
Really big.
What do you think about it?
Like a couple tons.
Couple tons?
Like 2 tons.
Well, that's what we're going to tell everybody. We'll stick with that.